Back to the Future, Rediscovering the Real. Glad to see such a great turnout this morning, especially at 10:30 in the morning. So let me ask a quick question. How many in our audience are what we would call full-fledged tape heads? Just raise your hands. Okay, great. And how many people kind of just want to find out and learn a little bit more about tape? Great, so we have a good mixture of audience. I want to just introduce our panel first. Closest to me is Charlie King, who has kind of been my tape guru for many, many years. I kind of didn't get into tape for years because it was a question of like machines and where and like could I get any parts for equipment and were there any tapes. And I think on our panel, Charlie has been my guru, and to the far right is Dan from the Tape Project, who basically made tape possible. His team with Paul Stubelwein, Mike Romanowski, and himself has brought tape to the forefront, and then with the help of people like Greg, who's next to Charlie, who's now making the United Home Audio deck that was on the front page, and Jonathan Tin, who's next to Greg, who's a lot of experience working with Bruce Brown with tape. We have a really great panel who's going to help everybody from experienced tape heads to those who want to get into the hobby. So again, just to take a little quote from Mike Spitz, nothing sounds like tape. Anyone who's heard tape knows once you've heard it, there's no going back, okay? Whether it's vinyl or digital, and we can argue whether tape has its own sound, which it clearly does. Everything does, because nothing still sounds like live music in our home. Tape, for many of us, brings us closest to that live event. There's been a tape renaissance, as many of you have been reading about for the last couple of years. Again, thanks to the trio, the Tape Project, there's been a resurgence of interest in tape. And again, these aren't the tapes like you're used to seeing from your dad, those mass-produced, high-speed tape tubes. These are real-time, one-on-one tape tubes from the master or from a running master. And again, as in many of these mediums, if you remember, even with digital, with SACD, the hardware came first, and then we later got the software for the hardware. And I think that's kind of, if you look back at the history of audio, whether it was reel-to-reel, whether it was vinyl, whether it was digital, hardware always outstripped the supply of software in the beginning. And our software supply for the people in tape is slowly catching up. We now have sources from Opus 3, we have Ultra Analog from Canada, we have the Master Tape Sound Labs, which were tapes from Costas Metaxas in Australia. We have Yarlung, which are some fantastic tapes. You can read some of my reviews on the Yarlung recordings on Positive Feedback. We have Jonathan Horwich upstairs from International Phonogram, has some wonderful jazz recordings. We have a recent announcement from Groove Note Ying Tang that he's going to be releasing 3 of his recordings on reel-to-reel. And if anyone's going to Newport, you'll get to hear those tapes at the Newport show. New tape that just came out that was sent to me from Premonition Records. There's the new Patricia Barber Cafe Blue out on reel-to-reel. And finally, from Germany, there's Quinton Records. And again, of course, as everyone knows, there's like eBay or ePay, as some people want to refer to it out there, as far as tape sources. Again, this was pretty much where it started. This was the machine that started it all, the Magnetophon, which was developed in Germany, which actually we knew about many years before and kind of forgot about. And again, just a little bit about the past. Reel-to-reel was covered in all the magazines back then. There's a picture here of Stereophile with illustrious Gordon Holt at the board here doing his own recordings, and that's been now followed up, by, of course, by John Atkinson, who now is doing it digitally. But in the old days, people made their own recordings. We've kind of got away from it, just like people used to build their own equipment. And on the right panel, you can see there was a review from Harry Pearson in the Absolute Sound of a TIAC machine. So again, both the magazines back then covered reel-to-reel. It was a big thing, although again, it tended to be the province of people that had some money. It wasn't a cheap date. And just one thing, again, because Charlie will lead into it, one of the things you do need to know about the tape is there are different EQ curves. And unfortunately, most of the American machines that were made with NAB. IEC tended to be more of a European curve, so that if we're going to play back most of the modern machines, we need to be able to find a deck that's IEC compatible, or to be able to add electronics that will make it playback compatible with these new tapes. So again, I just want to end up with pictures of a few of the old venerable war horses. If you look in the one panel, we have our Ampex 351, circa 1958. Many of those cherished recordings that we all have, whether it be now reissued on CD or original LP, were made on that. And on the right, we have the old Studer J37. And does everyone know what this deck was famous for? What group recorded on it? Beatles, right? So the Beatles kind of made the J37 famous. And then there were the War Horses, you know, probably, arguably, the best machines that they produced, the Ampex 102 circa 1974, and the Studer 880 circa 1970. So again, you can see the progression in the machines and the complexity. So what I'd like to do next is we're going to, Charlie is going to take over. I'm just going to load his presentation.
Thank you, Miles. 1846 or early 1947, the first reels of tape came out of 3M. And a buddy of mine found, got a bunch of old different kinds of tapes. And this is an example, and I was just going to pass this around. This is the first commercial tape made available in the United States. It was Scotch 100. And they actually made it in both plastic and paper-based. And this happens to be a reel of paper-based Scotch tape that I got. And if you look on here, somebody bought this and actually recorded a bunch of songs at home, because not only Ampex, but there were a number of companies making reel-to-reel decks probably back between 1948, 1952, 1955. And this is all popular music that somebody recorded, because that's the basic way that you could get long, long periods of time of music storage if you wanted. I played this tape and it sounds probably 95% as good today as it did when it first came out. So some of this things about how long can the medium, how long can stuff last, if you take care of it, keep it in a basically what kind of a room temperature, keep it away from humidity and stuff, it can last. It'll probably last longer than most of the media today, you know, CD-ROT and all this other type of stuff. I mean, this tape probably sound 100 years from now sound just as good as it is if I don't store it near my speakers. So anyway, let me just pass it on. I'll try to go over this really, really quickly for those who may be kind of new to this thing. And I want to just start a very simple analogy. Where with the tape thing, you've got the transport, which is pulls the tape by the tape head, which translates it from mechanical, or I guess it's magnetic to electrical signal. Then it goes through and that analogous is to the phono cartridge. Transport is your turntable tone arm, and then the tape preamp is your phono preamp. And by the way, I mean, basically it's just kind of a different frequency altering curve in the feedback network of your, or if you do it that way, of your electronics to just generate a little different curve than what the RIAA curve is that you would be familiar with your with phono. Very, very just simple. You put the tape on this side and it feeds through here and gets taken up over here. If you're doing record and playback, all the professional machines have 3 heads. You would erase whatever was on there. Hopefully not when you just want to listen. Then you'd record the signal, and then they put a playback head right there so you could listen immediately to what you recorded, make sure that it was okay. For what we're talking here, generally the machines, you really only need, you don't necessarily need the erase or the record head, you're just going to have a playback head.
So next up, we're going to have Greg Barron, and Greg is well represented here. I think he's got 4 of his really sexy looking machines in a number of rooms here. So guys and gals, make sure that you go up and visit Greg's rooms. You're in for a real treat here in his machines.
What I do is kind of a little bit different. I take a deck that was made, you know, fairly recently, until 2003, and I make a turnkey deck. No muss, no fuss, holistic approach to it. But in the beginning, you know, I wanted to lay down some design objectives, and that was to make a reference level, all-in-one box, reel-to-reel, with a transferable warranty, just as if you were buying a normal audio component. I needed a deck that had a high level of fit and finish, because my thoughts were that the audiophile that's going to be buying one of these decks, you know, wants it to be, you know, he's probably got very nice equipment, speakers, amps, preamps, the whole bit, and he didn't want something that was going to kind of stick out as a sore thumb. Wanted something that would look and nice with his system. One of the reasons why I chose the deck I chose was because it has very short signal paths. Like from the tape head to the preamps is only less than 2 inches long. So that offered a great opportunity to keep the noise levels down. I needed one that was attainable. Like I said, since the decks were made till 2003, I could actually buy them. I can still buy pieces and parts directly from Tascam. So that made it a lot easier if you were going to provide a deck with a warranty. And if you were providing the whole thing, you needed that cushion. I also wanted to make it in one box because my thoughts were that a guy putting it into a system wanted to use it like a component, basically connect the cables to it and off you go. It had to have good tape pass specs because otherwise, you know, like Charlie was saying, you know, you can get some problems, wild wind flutter, these types of things. So I wanted to avoid that. I wanted it to be easy to move. Something that, one person could grab the deck and move it. You didn't need to solicit help, 2 or 3 guys that are going to try to move something big and heavy as a washing machine. Yeah. It needed to have a good internal layout. The deck that I chose, the preamps go into the bottom, and they were automatically with the deck. There were 2 preamps, okay? One on each side, dual mono, made it very easy. Very short, as I said, signal path from the tape head to the preamp. With this deck, what I really wanted to do was also have some flexibility in terms of connections, because you never know what somebody's going to use in their systems. It has both XLR inputs and outputs, RCA, same thing. The head block was able to accommodate a larger head, and then one of the features that I wanted to include by taking this holistic approach was to put a mu metal can around the heads. And then at that point, you reduce the noise floor as well. There was plenty of room to redo the preamp. It was sized right. It could work upright, horizontal, whatever. And we really decided to take that all the way from the tape head, all the way to the outputs, and examine every little key element. Right now, I'm on a phase 11. When I started this, I started with a phase 1. So we're essentially that many generations down the road in terms of product development. I've had some really good folks working with me on this. My technician who does the actual work has a degree in electrical engineering. I have 2 engineers that I consult with, and they've been invaluable. I also wanted a deck with full logic controls. The great thing about my decks to this point, I've never heard of anybody damaging a tape. You can go from fast forward to rewind, and it's a very nice, control process for that switchback. It also has a spooling, or sometimes they call it a library feature, so that you can rewind or fast forward or whatever you want to do, and handles the tape nicely. The deck came with 7.5 IPS or 15 IPS, does NAB or IEC, so it was in 2 tracks. So it was a good mix for the tape project tapes that were coming out. And basically, I mean, if it wouldn't have been for Dan and Paul and those guys, I'm real good. Those are the guys that started the ball rolling and really made it something that it was attainable. To get that kind of sound in your own home is what we're really talking about here. And why do I want to do that? I'm trying to convert more audio files to tape. Who? Well, these guys that have $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 turntables, that's who we need to grab. We need to grab their attention. We need to have those people step up, because those guys are who is going to buy all of this stuff. Those are the guys that are gonna buy the tapes, the tape decks, and you have to have money coming into something to make it go ahead. It's just that simple. Luckily, you know, some of these efforts once in a while, you know, a blind squirrel finds a nut, and I've been lucky, been able to get some decent awards. I've sent decks all over everywhere to be reviewed last year, and some are going out, some other ones are going out this year. And you'll start seeing these reviews coming in this year. One of the magazines, The Absolute Sound, is alleging that they're really going to get behind tape as a, you know, a viable alternative to vinyl for analog guys. So, you know, everybody cross their fingers. Hopefully that's going to happen. And I think that we're all here in agreement that our money is probably going to go to music versus zeros and ones for the most part. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Next up is Dan, or who's known as Doc. It's my distinguished pleasure to have had him come here and talk for us. He's really been the person who's responsible for everything that we're able to do. Without the software, all the hardware would have been useless. So,
Unlike these other guys, they didn't come with a wonderful, well-organized presentation. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about how we started the project maybe, and maybe fill a few gaps in here. I suppose some of you know about who I am and who my partners are, but if you don't, I have a company called Bottlehead. We've been actually making audio kits for about 20 years. They're all vacuum tube based, and so I'm kind of a gearhead, even though I'm up here talking about software tonight. I have two partners who are quite well-known mastering engineers. Paul Stubblebine has got a Grammy under his belt. He does a lot of well-known audiophile mastering, and someone who kind of came up under Paul's wing, who's now a very, very competent mastering engineer of his own, Michael Romanowski. So these guys are my best buds, and I guess it must have been about 10 years ago now. I was asked to come down and help them set up in a mastering room. For those of you who don't know, mastering room is your ultimate fantasy listening room. It's just the best you can throw in of the best. Guys having an excuse of being able to write it off on their taxes. So I was asked to come down and set up some gear, and when we would evaluate the equipment we were putting in there, we would try to decide what we wanted to listen to at the end of a long day. And the thing that we kept going back to was 1-inch 2-track tape, which is a very rare format that's really only used in the mastering business. The reason it is used is because the extra wide tape allows you to retain a higher signal to noise ratio. You keep more of the good music on the tape. A few gin and tonics, a few steak dinners later, we kind of thought, gosh, maybe we could share this idea with people. And that created 2 or 3 years of fooling around and trying some different ideas and talking the idea up, which included a lot of going to shows and talking to well-known people in the industry and having them look at us like we were completely insane. Lucky for us, we were insane. Derive a little enthusiasm from them after we pitched the idea for 10 or 20 minutes. And for good or bad, that finally drove us to go ahead and start the tape project. And the tape project, the basic concept is to acquire well-known, highly regarded recordings from major labels, acquire the original master tape from them. We license typically 200 copies. We bring that tape into our facility. Paul Stubblebine actually masters. The process of mastering is one of making slight, very, very minor corrections, a lot of corrections people wouldn't even know are being done, and basically editing that music together from several different tapes or whatever files or whatever, depending on the medium you're working in, into a single coherent album. So Paul does that process. He actually makes these, what we call a running master, on a 1-inch 2-track tape. This is recorded at 15 inches per second. There's a lot of different speeds that are used for tape. The two that are used in the industry are 15 inches per second, 30 inches per second. Time's short here, I'm not going to go into why. We chose 15. We thought that worked a little better because we're trying to maintain a very, very high standard in what we're doing. With these running masters, and we actually make 3 of these to brace ourselves for the fact that tape is a somewhat fragile medium and you can screw it up, and in fact, we've done it once or twice. These running masters are played back on a machine that's called the master machine. It's played back in real time. It's not done at high speed, which is the way that the tapes that Charlie was talking about that were done on little 7-inch reels were mass-produced at very high speeds with its attendant drop in quality. These things are actually mastered in real time. Currently we have 3 ATR 102s, you saw a picture of those up there, decks, that are recording this onto a 1/4-inch 2-track tape at 15 inches per second. And the equalization, as Charlie was talking about, is something called IEC. Again, I don't want to get too technical here, but we made technical choices to try and maintain the integrity of the original recording as highly as good. We got a Duping engineer sitting in there monitoring this stuff in real time. We have an automatic switcher that's switching and listening to these 3 machines every 10 seconds while the tape is running. So that's the process. We make a couple hundred copies. We have currently licensed 28 titles. So that's basically how the process works. I don't want to, we're kind of running out of the hour here.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Tim. My background, you know, I'm really here basically because Keith Choi couldn't make it, and Bruce Brown couldn't make it. There was an NPC. You know, I'm available most times. I own 3 companies. I own a company that produces speakers called Evolution Acoustics. I also own another company that produces digital playback machines, playback designs. And I also own another company that does turntables called Wave Kinetics and isolation footers. That being said, I'm really passionate about all formats of music. And you know, for me, my experience that I'm looking to share with you is so hopefully you don't make the same mistakes I made. And I went out, I got just totally gung-ho as soon as I heard about Dan and Paul doing the tape project. I thought, you know, how fantastic is this? And I started going out and searching for the Studers and the Ampex machines. And I bought 3, I started with 3 Studers, 2 A80 RC Mark IIs. One I bought out of Nashville, another one I'm not sure where it came from, maybe Texas, from some studios. And you know, the problem was they were disclosed as just incredible machines working, fantastic working condition. Heads were in great shape. And you know, also a couple of Ampex ATR 102s that I bought, same way. In each case, you know, they were totally disclosed improperly, and you know, I thought I was getting into this based on spending a certain amount of money that I thought was worthwhile, whether $2,500 or $3,500 or $1,500, whatever it was. I thought that was a reasonable amount of money. Well, what it came down to is I really didn't know what I was getting. You know, these people weren't honest about it, and I ended up having to spend thousands of dollars on each machine to get it ready. So I think if there's any advice I can give you with regards to this, you know, Greg's approach is a very good approach. You're getting something that's already done, it's warranted, and that's critical. Another great guy to deal with is Mike Spitz. He's probably the most knowledgeable guy I know of when it comes to everything from the tape itself. He's producing the tape to the ATR 102s and Studers he can work on as well. There's not a part on the Ampex that he can't reproduce. And one of the machines I bought, I'll tell you the story, came from a studio in California. And again, was disclosed as just fantastic. I paid good money for the machine. Got there, I checked everything. You know, it seemed to look okay in some ways. I turn it on and I play a tape, and after about 20 seconds, the machine dies. So I sent it to Spitz, and he said it's the single worst machine he's ever seen. So, you know, it cost quite a bit of money, and what I got back was better than a new machine. I say that because when Ampex released the machines, I mean, they were having problems. And I don't know if, you know, if you guys know this, but Studer was basically supplying Europe with all these broadcast machines and you know, machines for recording. And Ampex was basically dealing with the U.S. And, you know, Ampex, they're my personal favorite machines. I don't have experience with bricks, so I can't really speak to that. But, you know, Dan's using Ampex, and they're my personal favorites. I also love the Studers, but, you know, what they're capable of is amazing. And, you know, if you're looking at this, be prepared. If you know, you buy something off of eBay or from someone and you don't really get a chance to have the machine sorted out and gone through, you know, don't be surprised if it's going to cost you $7,000, $8,000 more in repairs. And I hate to say that because it's negative, but, you know, the idea of this is that you want to make informed decisions. And, you know, I can tell you, every mistake I made, you know, and all the money I've spent, you know, redoing those machines, it's been worth every cent. I could, you know, if you're interested in Ampex, contact Mike Spitz directly. Don't go through eBay and all those stuff. So you're just going to get burnt. And, you know, if you're looking for, you know, other solutions, obviously Greg's stuff is just gorgeous. And Studer, if you're willing to wait for it, you could call Keith Choi in Seattle. This guy went from knowing absolutely nothing about tapes and tape machines in a short time. You know, he's probably, you know, one of the most knowledgeable guys on Studers, and there's very little he can't repair on those or deal with. It's just time related. So with him, you're going to have to wait. But there are some great sources. Thanks for the time, and you know, hopefully we got
Thanks, Jonathan. And there's also a few other sources for machines, like as Jonathan said, if you're patient, you can buy a Techniques machine, send it to Tim DeParavicini. You might see it in a year or so. That's a little bit of patience, but you'll have a great machine. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 of them in this country. I think Dan Meinwald, who's upstairs, he doesn't have it with him, has the machine. So anyway, you can see there's a lot of different opportunities out there, but I think everybody here kind of opens your ears up when you hear what they talk about as far as the tape sound and handling the tapes and having them in your hands.